No! Stay back! No, stop it!
Okay, so the first attempt at a relaunch didn't work so well, but if this movie teaches anything, it's that you shouldn't waste time in self-pity when you can instead focus on self-improvement. That or no amount of success will fill this persisting feeling of emptiness, and that it's my
responsibility to make sure no one else follows the same empty path.
Really, the meaning doesn't need much focus since we have a new movie, a new battle, and a new way to look at a beloved 90s franchise.
I played your favorite song, the one you liked so much. Each year I grant myself one day to remember you.
Starting off with a change that's both glaring and has long-reaching effects, the tournament has been completely omitted from this movie. Doing this prevents the majority of the manual backgrounds from being applied to the film. Instead, they're given new reasons for why they get involved. Terry is directly confronted by Krauser, who wants to see the fighting skills of the man who beat Geese, and later decides to take up Krauser's invitation for a rematch after losing the first time. This news somehow reaches a wrestler, who then informs Joe, and he decides to take that information to Andy with the hopes that he'll agree to go avenge Terry's loss. Oh, and Mai is also there for emotional support. This roundabout way of getting the characters involved in the main plot is because, in an odd bit of irony, this sequel to a video game movie has the major game characters sectioned off into their own side plot while the protagonist teams up with a movie original character. Like Terry's love of his hour, this character's background isn't too relevant to this section of the video. At the moment, I'll say that he's someone who admires Southtown's Wolf, and begins following him around when he learns that the man who looks just like Terry Bogard is, in fact, Terry Bogard. The majority of the characters don't really have much of their own personal story brought up, instead serving as a quick visual demonstration of our main character's abilities. Juve and Lauren do have more about their characters revealed, but it's two characters who already know, or just don't care. There are some nice little accuracies. Like what Raiden did with himself after his boss took a dive, or Andy going back to Japan for more training. At the same time, simple source material accuracy isn't what defines a character's overall quality in this series. For that, you can just look towards whereas this version of Geese felt lackluster thanks to his defining two features being presented in an incompetent light, or hardly any light, Krauser hits every note he needed to. He's a vicious noble man who takes joy in crushing those he finds to be amusing, yet fragile. Seeking to have an air of civility surrounding every conversation he has, before proceeding to crush someone's skull with his hands. While Geese uses his business to indulge in his proclivities in private, Krauser weaves his interest into every part of his life. We even have more pathos given to Krauser's past as the film shows that despite the privilege he was born into, he still faced adversity and failure. Be it game fans, anime fans, or even people just looking for something they can laugh at on any level, Krauser delivers in every regard. Whereas the rest of the main characters have backgrounds that range from serviceable to bizarre narrative choices when it comes to Wolfgang.
So nice when diabolical evil lives up to the hype.
Also, Geese and Billy return. The former has part of his backstory incorporated in the film, showing that he and his mother were abandoned by his father who left for what he saw as a better opportunity to improve his social status. The end result being Krauser. I've already established I don't care much for this version of Geese, and Billy appears for all of 8 seconds. Time to get back some of my momentum with sticking.
Do it! You finally come back. Don't leave me again.
Be silent, woman! Andy's spirit is burning with revenge.
Sticking with the wolf of the film, Krauser and Geese are half-brothers who seek to outperform each other and surpass their father. This storyline usually has the siblings in question grow up together in the same household. So that when we see them later on in their lives, it becomes apparent that despite them physically moving on from that point and presenting themselves as strong and capable, they can't help but have their emotions and decisions heavily dictated by that need for parental approval they had as kids. From what the movie shows, there's nothing really implying he saw either his brother or father much after the failed assassination attempt. Also, given what he says before trying his hand at patricide, getting his father's approval doesn't really seem like something he would think is possible or even want. Now it could be argued that human psychology isn't so straightforward and that it's entirely possible to have negative feelings towards someone you still want to be loved by. It can even be said that in a twisted way both brothers achieved their goal, as killing your adopted daughter is more severe than abandoning your son, and beating your son believing he'll become stronger isn't quite on the same level as going to a different country to beat up a stranger for fun. If those thoughts crossed your mind, then you should save that type of analysis for a different movie, since here Geese does not play a significant active role in the plot beyond giving minimal information. So we don't see much of his thought process. Krauser doesn't really suffer the same issue since Geese did make a name for himself in the martial arts world, so he would naturally be interested in who defeated him even if Geese wasn't his brother. The problem is instead that Krauser doesn't spare a single thought towards Geese after their meeting in a cave, so really the connection once again doesn't get to be shown in much of a meaningful light. This all ties back to what is probably going to be my first real controversial point on this channel. I think Fatal Fury 2 has the weakest plot out of the 4 main Fatal Fury games.
Gum! Tiger! Kick!
If you'll allow me to explain. The first game focused on 2 brothers coming back to their hometown for a chance to avenge their father's death. 3, while out there even for this franchise, still had the characters travel the world to prevent a powerful item from falling into the wrong hands, and real bout was the conclusion of a mutual feud started in the first game. For 2, why are any of the characters fighting? It's not to settle grudges, ideological conflicts, or even to discover a life-changing truth. They just saw the tournament as a good way to test their abilities, with Krauser hosting the tournament for essentially the same reason. The only 2 characters with strong reasons for entering the tournament are the villains from the first game. This movie tries accounting for this by having Terry's need to fight and desire to win be a fulcrum of his emotional stability. So when it's broken by losing to a fighter he couldn't even scratch, he spirals into a state of self-loathing and disillusionment with his own future as a fighter. This is a well-thought-out addition to his character, if you ignore the previous film never hinting at this side of Terry, and even this movie he starts out seemingly less concerned with his life as a fighter and more with just living a normal life overall. A person may be able to overlook this, or even justify it by saying we never see this aspect to his personality in the last movie because he doesn't lose, and that he's still up for a fight in this movie. Fair enough, but this movie walks into a bigger problem by insisting this a trait both he and Krauser share. When looking at the backgrounds for both characters, this becomes a skin-deep comparison, and frames this new angle given to Terry's character as less of a way for the filmmakers to apply fresh ideas while still being consistent with what came before, and more of a half-hearted attempt to make the fight between the hero and villain more cinematic than it actually is. Another way the film tries giving Terry more emotional stakes in this fight is through the constant support of his own enthusiastic fan. That suffers thanks to said fan, Tony, having his individuality as a character pushed aside to prop up Terry's story. For instance, one of his first scenes have him insult some kids for inaccurately representing Terry. They proceed to laugh at his dead father, and he responds by trying to break their skulls. A typical discussion on the internet by today's standard, but in the movie this would suggest a character struggles with their anger and have a storyline about overcoming that flaw. Here it only exists to show Terry defeating Geese on a private island became public knowledge, and show how mature he is by stopping Tony. Tony is also shown no issues abandoning his mom for the chance to follow Terry, hinting that they have personal issues that could be elaborated on, but really it's just there to give Terry more justification for telling Tony not to be like him. Everything that could be used to help flesh out Tony's character quickly just becomes about Terry, even when the film tries presenting the opposite. He's not my least favorite version of this character type, nor one of the more wildly criticized, but he's the most superfluous example I've seen so far. His only real impact is being Terry's main emotional support, a role he has because the significant main characters from the games received less screen time so that Tony could fill that role. Getting to those other characters, Joe still pretty much exists to help the Bogarts advance their story. This time by delivering messages and fighting on their behalf. I will say that he at least does get scenes that allow his character traits to take center stage rather than just being there to highlight a detail about Terry or Andy. Finally, it's time to oh yeah, there's still my She still has the same background that connects her to Andy, and the movie does alter their, at the time, current relationship from the games by showing Andy's not against the idea of them actually dating. Which is a good way to keep her main joke from getting stale. Outside of that, Mai in both the games and movie doesn't have much going on for her character. She likes Andy and wants to marry him, and enters the tournament to make that fact known or just helps out for fun. No plot-driving motivation, or noticeable development from her introduction to her latest appearance, and while she does have other friends, their interactions are pretty basic and mostly played for comedy. As opposed to still being funny, yet clearly showing the pivotal influence she has on characters outside of Andy. Or with Andy. Speaking of which, I can't help but speculate that one of the main reasons discussion around her character is so positive is because Andy is shown to be more considerate to her feelings. As opposed to looking uncomfortable or annoyed anytime she gets too close to him like with other versions of this dynamic. Her lackluster writing is made even more apparent when characters following Mai with either similar ideas, or practically the same narrative role, managed to have relationships that grew and evolved, or had the main connection to their series also see a significant change in a shorter time span than 20 years. She's not bad, but nothing about her character warrants significant attention. Now
I know what you're thinking, but stop it and pay attention to the story, sickos.
Now that I've guaranteed that even less people take me seriously, it's time to fulfill a promise.
There he is. Ron.
Before really tearing into Andy, I should probably go over the idea of foils in fighting games. 98% of foils are relatively equal yet opposing characters within the game. This comes with them having related but separate goals that they both achieve and look formidable doing so. Even when they're on the same side and have the same objective, they can still come across as true equals if given different roles that allow us to see their unique strengths. Andy falls into the other 2% where not only does he have the same goal as the protagonist, but the way he goes about achieving it is also pretty much the same. This often leads to scenarios where only one of them can actually have a significant victory, and it shouldn't be too hard to guess who the developers favor. I'm bringing this up not because of my light and fair breakdown of other characters, but instead because this plot seems tailor-made for Andy. While on one hand Andy's background is as different from Krauser's as Terry's is, this time the differences highlight the fact that Krauser theoretically has everything Andy would want. More time with his father, a clear victory over his brother, advanced mastery over his preferred fighting style, yet he's arguably more miserable than Andy. This would showcase that the type of self-satisfaction most people seek doesn't come from external success, but instead how you view the weaker parts of yourself. Krauser sees his weakness as a mistake that needs to be purged, and Andy recognizes his failures as understandable steps to grow. Even the idea of being dependent on winning falls more in line with what we've seen of this version of Andy. It's one thing to not like the direction a story takes a character in, it's another issue when an adaptation, that's already established it's willing to make significant changes to the source material, outlines the issue with a character, and does nothing to improve upon it. Fighting game.
Well, that would make you the winning loser, wouldn't it? And if that's good enough for you, then I can see why my opinion doesn't mean much to you either.
Fighting games are no stranger to movie adaptations completely removing the tournament within the game. Even when that can be seen as a negative change, it still is an understandable decision when looking at the plot each movie decides to go with. Here, there's no real benefit to the tournament being removed. It still keeps the same plot beats from the game. The game had its tournament be international, so it couldn't have been removed for that reason. It's not like the fights themselves take place in areas that couldn't just as easily be stages for a fight, and it can't even be said it was done because they didn't want Terry fighting again until a certain moment in the plot. Arguably having the tournament works better for the changes it does make since it doesn't lead to bizarre timeline discrepancies where characters are traveling to different countries within what looks to be the same day. And having the characters see Terry's pitiful state in person would have given their need to avenge him a stronger sense of importance, as well as allow Terry to see what his own self-destructive behavior is doing to the people he cares about. This is just a change without much substance.
It's time to say goodbye.
Terry,
Tony!
Mom!
Joe tries beating on Krauser, and fails. Andy wants to see who between him and Terry can defeat Krauser. Succeeds. and Mai wants Andy to be more affectionate, so she takes what she can get. Terry finds the inner strength to finally beat Krauser, and Wolfgang takes it surprisingly well, only killing himself in the process, and Tony returns to his mother promising to be strong like Terry. Whether that be physically or emotionally is a story that no one at SNK is interested in writing. And Geese knew about all of this thanks to his henchmen. This movie was a surprising mixed bag. Improving in areas like the animation and villain, keeping some of the same habits from the previous film, and bringing an issue with the game to the forefront without really improving on it. If you don't care for the stories in these games, or even think I'm blowing the issue with Fatal Fury 2's plot out of proportion, then you'll see this as a clear improvement. I on the other hand look and see a movie that couldn't accomplish everything it wanted to do without hurting itself in the process. The next movie leaves me in an awkward position. It's not an adaptation of any previous story, but it also isn't trying to come across like it takes place in the game's universe, so it might not even qualify for this series. Oh well, another problem for another day.